Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday from Pastor George. And today I want to talk about where or what is your foundation? What is your foundation? I continually, as I go out into the world and interact with people, especially people around my own age, I realize that one of the great problems of our century and of our time and of the church, and this is something the church has to face, is where do people put their foundation? Uh, there are all sorts of different places you can put it, but a lot of people end up putting it in the wrong places. The ones for our time, obviously, you have ones that kind of go past all times. I mean, like wealth, right? Is always one of the easiest places you can build a foundation, right? Where do you find your meaning? Where do you find your sustenance? Where do you find the thing that reminds you to keep going or that gives you meaning for the rest of your life, right? Where do you find that? Well, most people, especially my age, but I even think this is true of people in like Generation X and certainly Generation Z after us millennials, struggle with. I think that they lack this, and it is not because that they're stupid or anything like that. It is just because parts of our society have failed to give that to them, and it's a failure that extends for many decades in the past, and all generations are complicit in it. And of course, one of the biggest complicitors in this is the church, which has been very quick to give up its influence in the culture for either political points or points to with the cultural sphere, or to get people to like us more or something like that. And it's just ended up creating generations of people who are in many ways Christian by their morality, but unable to justify it in any realistic way. And this has very bad consequences for humanity. And this is actually something that we've learned in the 20th century, especially when it comes to politics, which is one of the other areas that people usually put all of their energy into, right? Politics, nationalism, identity by race or ethnicity, right? All of these things you can choose to build a foundation on that ultimately are kind of can crumble. I mean, even today, of course, like there's gender and sexuality and all these identifiers, right, that we can find and make those our number one thing as well, which is not what the Bible teaches, nor is it sustainable in any real sense of the word. And it reminds me of this thinker who his name is Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he wrote this book called The Gulag Archipelago, the big 3-volume set, and it's all about the Soviet Union. And he was a writer in it, and he served in the Soviet Army in World War II, and he ends up becoming a dissident, gets thrown into gulags in Siberia, and it's about his experiences. And he gave this great address. He was given the Templeton Prize by the British government, and he gave an address to it. And basically, the title of the speech is "Men Have Forgotten God," and I can link the whole speech in the description below. But there's a center part of it where he gets at the root of what he's talking about, and I'm gonna read that for you guys right now because I think it is a good reminder of why we need to be very careful about this. So remember, he's speaking about his experiences growing up in Russia and living in the Soviet Union, and this is what he says. And this speech was given in 1983, just so you can have an idea of when he's talking about when he says half century. So this is what he says. He says, more than a half century ago, while I was still a child, I recall hearing a number of older people offer the following explanation for the great disasters that had befallen Russia. Men have forgotten God. That's why all this has happened. Since then, I have spent well nigh 50 years working on the history of our revolution. In the process, I have read hundreds of books, collected hundreds of personal testimonies, and have already contributed 8 volumes of my own toward the effort of clearing away the rubble left by that upheaval. But if I were asked today to formulate as concisely as possible the main cause of the ruinous revolution that swallowed up some 60 million of our people, I could not put it more accurately than to repeat, men have forgotten God. That's why all of this happened. So he was a true believer in the socialist revolution in Russia at the time, and of course, which was part of the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was, of course, one of the most destructive and evil states that has ever existed, built upon an ideology of Marxism and socialism. Maybe I should do a whole thing on Marxism at some point and talk about that, because it's a whole other thing. But But what they did is they got rid of God, right? And they supplanted it with this new ideology. And if you don't know anything about Marxism or communism, just know that it accounts, it's a lot like a religion in the sense that it accounts both for a past and a future, and it gives you a whole view of the world that you can have. It's not just this political ideology that seems kind of innocuous. It really is a totalistic view of looking at the world. And they took that, and that was their thing, right? And of course they exported that into the other countries in the Soviet Union and things like that. And of course, you see other political movements do this as well, with National Socialism in Germany, fascism in Italy, things like that, right? They give you these totalistic ways of viewing the world. And what ends up happening is they cut out the church from these things, right? Because religion is really the thing that is supposed to supply someone their worldview. This is something humans have known since forever, really, until the modern age, that religion was the defining thing that shaped society, not these other kind of factors. Even the Romans and the Greeks understood that. The ancient Babylonians and Sumerians understood that. And it's just probably because they actually had more respect for the divine in their lives. Well, we have lost that. And so today, we are kind of just unhooked from where our center should be, and we shouldn't be surprised when we lose that center, that bad things start to happen, or that people become more radicalized or more hateful towards one another as they cling to these new ideologies that, while giving them a totally good look at the world, do not completely round it out and even stoke tension between people. Or they completely check out of society because they don't know what their purpose in life is at all. It just seems as though we are these beings that exist in the universe for, 8 decades on average, and then we die, and then nothing changes. No one will ultimately remember us, and life is meaningless, right? Those are kind of the two places where people are stuck right now, and it is the church's job to go in and remind people that no, there is a reason for all this to happen, and yes, your life does have a meaning, and it is most meaningful when it is built upon the foundation of Jesus Christ, right? So it's just something to be aware of, because many of us interact with all sorts of people from different ages, and it's our jobs, whether our kids have friends or it's our kids themselves, or me or whoever. You interact with people of these different generations and different mindsets, and maybe you're of this mindset, and it's important to actually look at where these ideas come from. So maybe next week I'll talk about Marxism. That sounds like it might be a little interesting, unless I have something more interesting to talk about. Anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow for Bible study and Thursday for my next Theolog. Peace out.